Qusay al-Jundi and Mohamed El-Aboud were already known to be terrible con artists, but after targeting a 71-year-old with the plan to scam her of her entire property empire, they overstepped the line. Things would rapidly go south after this, leading to the cruel murder of Louise Kam in one of the most dreadful ways possible. But even after her death, her killers would reach new depths of depravity by recording TikTok videos in her home, which they now claimed was theirs. Bragging, flexing, and gloating about their stolen property was recorded for the whole world to see. But little did Qusay and Mohamed know that they were throwing more and more evidence directly into the spotlight. And soon enough, they would have to face the full force of the law. Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're heading to London to look at the terrible case of Louise Kam. Now, there is nothing nice to say about scammers, but it's how these two acted after the murders that make both of them so insufferable. And all I can say is wow to the TikTok videos. Even Nira doesn't like them. What do you say about TikTok videos, mate? Do you think we should go on TikTok? Yeah? I think that's a yes. By the way, I report on true crime, strange and chilling stories, and the best way to support me is by subscribing to the channel. So please hit subscribe if you like darkly fascinating stories, or if you simply like coffee. Cheers. I responded to most comments in the first hour of my videos going live, so if you want to catch me for a question or just say hi, then please hit the bell notification too. And now, with all of that said, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat, and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Louise Kam. It's always quite jarring when cases occur a little too close to home, as today we're travelling to the much-loved, well-travelled and historic capital city, London. Now, there's a lot that could be said about London. I could be here for many hours talking about the dark, strange and downright chilling stories that have happened here throughout history. From Jack the Ripper to the historic jails tucked away in the city's many nooks and crannies. This renowned city has a dark past of cruelty, sinister souls, and a variety of stories that can make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Many cities have their own underground subway or metro systems, but did you know that London has the most extensive and well-connected system in the world? And of course, I'm talking about the tube. I mean, I'd know, I live here. Although getting around may be crowded, and with temperatures that rival the surface of the sun, it is extremely easy and efficient. Or at least when the bloody trains are working, that is. But here is something that you may not know. The tube aside, London has various other underground networks which remain private and hidden from the public eye. From the occasional unused platform to entire abandoned stations, all the way through to hidden bomb-proof bunkers and escape rails which were set up for Winston Churchill during World War II. London is so old that some of these stations have simply become redundant through the decades. This including Aldwych Station, which was abandoned in the year 1994. The station opened as Strand in 1907 on the site of the former Royal Strand Theatre, and apparently it is thought to have inherited the ghost of an actress, who has been reported as standing on the tracks late at night. London is also littered with underground bunkers, which were created to protect those against airstrikes in World War II, and even nuclear bombs during the Cold War. Today we're travelling to the north of London, to the boroughs of Barnes and Harrow, and the leafy county of Hertfordshire. And it's here, in the quaintly named town of Potter's Bar, that we find a very important woman in today's case. That of course being 71-year-old Louise Kam. Louise was a divorced small-time businesswoman and a gentle mother of two now adult sons, one of whom, named Greg, she was extremely close to. Her two boys had always been her priority, and she did whatever she could to give them a good life. And even now, in her golden years, she often thought about them and their future. In the recent decades, she had started a sizable catering business with her husband, who was now from a previous marriage. A venture which had become so successful that by the year 2020, she owned two properties located around North London. Obviously, this is quite a huge achievement. London is amongst the most expensive cities in the world, and even in the outer suburbs, a relatively small house can set you back well over £1 million, the equivalent of $1.26 million. Now obviously I don't have to tell you that that is a lot of money. The two properties that Louise owned amounted to a whopping £4.6 million, one of which was a shop with 3 flats above them in Willesden, northwest of London. Our story today though will primarily focus on her other property, that being a 4-bedroom house located at 16 Gallants Farm Road in the borough of Barnet. While Louise wasn't currently living at this property, she did rent it out to other people on occasion, that of course giving her another stream of passive income. Saying that, the house was sat vacant by the start of 2021. Not wanting to lose any money, and considering her increasing age, she started to explore the idea of selling both of her properties. That being so she could leave the money for her 2 sons and for them to live comfortably. It was at that moment that a friend of hers put her in contact with a man who was looking to buy some investment properties. And this individual was a 24-year-old man named Qusay Al-Jundi. Qusay was local to Harrow and worked as a chef at the Yasmin Sham restaurant located in Willesden. Now, even from here, I can hear you asking one very obvious question. How on earth could a kebab shop chef afford a house valued at over £1 million? Well, despite his very humble position, he claimed to have a very wealthy girlfriend who wanted to buy property. He further claimed that she was currently working abroad, so it was down to him to scope out the potential sale. Now, Louise was a regular customer at the kebab shop already, and so after connecting with Qusay, this would be the place that they often talked about selling the property. Qusay also told Louise that, despite the age difference, he was already married to a woman in her 60s named Anna Reich. Anna was a wealthy woman who frequently visited the restaurant, and Qusay would often shower her with affection and compliments. But sadly, unknown to Louise, all of this was lies and manipulation, as Qusay was in fact married to a completely different woman and even had 3 children. Now, this didn't stop Qusay from conning an Audi TT and a Toyota RAV4 from the elderly Anna, to which he unashamedly promised to pay for eventually. You can probably see where this is going though, because, as you may have guessed, not a penny would ever materialize. Having both of these cars led Louise to believe that he was actually a very wealthy man, which of course made her believe that he had enough money to afford to buy her property. Eventually, Qusay and Louise agreed to meet at a property on July the 26th, 2021, in which Qusay mentioned that his so-called solicitor would be in attendance to help manage the transfer of ownership. But unfortunately, not everything was quite as it seemed. Qusay had managed to convince her to keep their sale of the property under the table, so to speak. Doing this meant that she could avoid hefty taxes on their transaction, which in return would benefit both of them. Now, Louise was skeptical about this, and so was her son Greg, but she did eventually believe that this was the best thing she could do for her family, so she reluctantly agreed. In the morning of July 26th, Louise was seen by a friend in the Spires shopping centre located in Barnet. There was nothing unusual or out of the ordinary in this sighting or her behaviour, but sadly, little did anyone know that this friend would be the last person to see her alive. The following day, on July the 27th, 2021, Greg began to receive very bizarre texts from his mother. Her messages were extremely out of character, and even more so, their content made no sense at all. Found within these messages, she wrote of how she had stolen money from a local man, and in order to escape the law, she had fled to China in order to start a new life with her stolen fortune. Now, these messages were worryingly nonsensical, and so in an effort to try and gain clarity of the situation, Greg tried to call Louise's mobile phone, but concerningly, each and every call went unanswered. It was obvious that this was completely out of the ordinary. His mother had plenty of money, had never expressed a desire to go to China, had never given the smallest hint that she was any kind of a thief, and would never just up and leave her 2 much-loved sons like this. Checking her home in Potter's Bar yielded nothing, and so, fearing something terrible had happened to his mother, he turned to the police and reported her as missing. Following the worrying news, several people came forward with valuable information, with some even claiming that they'd seen her earlier that morning at the local shopping centre. But the most crucial lead came from Louise's friend, who actually was the one to refer her to Qusay. Louise had told this friend about their arrangement to meet at the property on the 26th, which just so happened to be the same day that she went missing. After learning of this information, investigators searched the residence of 16 Gallants Park Road, where they found an empty driveway and an even emptier house. During their examination, detectives noticed that the house had been recently lived in. Sofa cushions were not in their place, dirty plates were stacked up in the sink, and fresh takeaway boxes were found in the bin. All of this suggested that the home had been used in recent days. which of course could include or exclude Louise. With the home not coming up with any substantial leads, Kasai became the officer's next point of call, and upon questioning, it became clear that he knew more than he was letting on. As a result, Kasai was brought in for further questioning, and the situation began to escalate when he refused to speak to officers. 2 days after her disappearance, officers managed to find Louise's vehicle on a nearby driveway, and after talking to the supposed owner, he was just as shocked as they were. It turns out that her vehicle had recently been sold to her by someone who claimed to be the owner, but actually wasn't. And the seller, well, he turned out to be a delivery driver from the exact same restaurant where Kasai worked. But Kasai was not the main guy they were interested in right now. In fact, it was that delivery driver, and his name was Mohamed El-Aboud. Mohamed El-Aboud, who was 28 years old, was born in Romania. Not much is known about his past, but quite frankly, it doesn't matter. This man has to be one of the most insufferable personalities that I've ever come across, and having to watch his TikTok videos has likely taken several years off of my own life. In his videos, he can be seen driving while using his phone, smirking and grinning with absolute confidence, spanking his own butt to reveal a very mediocre car that he didn't even own, and pulling downright ridiculous faces. And if there is anything that won't piss you off more, just listen to this laugh. Mohamed had already been linked to Louise Kam's disappearance, but with proof that he had now unlawfully sold her vehicle, his involvement seemed undeniable. And with this information, he was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. It didn't take long for this pathetic nut to crack. After a combination of physical and digital evidence was revealed to him, his story began to unravel, and found hiding in the dark mystery of her disappearance was Kasai. Mohamed confessed that he and his friend had conspired to scam her of her properties, and now that he was in custody with no way out, he slowly began to tell the investigators everything. On July 26th, a surveillance camera captured Louise driving her BMW to 16 Gallants Farm Road. She was scheduled to meet with Kasai and a so-called solicitor to discuss the sale of her property. Her son had warned her against making the deal, but she was insistent that this deal would be financially better for the family. Sadly though, Greg's intuition was correct, because Kasai's solicitor was in fact actually Mohamed. Unbeknownst to her at the time, Mohamed had actually been living at the property for several days already, illegally squatting and making himself at home. For those unsure what squatting is, it's when someone breaks into a property that they don't own and lives there without paying rent. Mohamed was so arrogant and self-entitled about living here for those few days that he even invited his girlfriend over and bragged that the place was his. And we know this because the couple created several TikTok videos together, and during this time frame, Mohamed's cringy drivel just seemed to get worse. Days before their meeting, Mohamed posted a video of himself and his girlfriend dancing along to music, laughing, and obviously having a good time in a home neither of them had any right to stay in. It is worth noting that his girlfriend at the time, named Maria, did not know about Mohamed's and Kasai's plans. Furthermore, she had no idea that he was living there unlawfully, and therefore is innocent of any wrongdoing. These were not the only videos recorded at the house either. Mohamed posted several other vanity videos, which included dancing and singing in front of mirrors, and whatever this was supposed to be. One of the most incriminating of videos taken before July the 26th was one of him taking a tour of Louise's property. Although the home was empty, he described it as if it were his own, and spoke about moving in, this including his awful laugh at the end.
O frumusețe de băiat pe aici, așa, bucătărie cât casă. Asta cum se numește salonul sau cum se spune în limba română, așa. Și adevărul e că nu e bani în buzunar. Așa că trăiesc.
It is obvious that Mohamed was well on board with Kasai's plan to acquire Louise's property, and furthermore, he seemed to be excited at the prospect of living in this new house. Kasai insisted that their plan was bulletproof and that Louise would sign her properties over to them. After all, he had been working on this scam for several months now. But after arriving, Louise sensed that something was dreadfully wrong. She had planned to meet a formally dressed solicitor and not the scruffy likes of Mohamed. With apprehension, she now refused to sign anything that the pair put forward. I mean, tax fraud is still tax fraud and therefore a crime, but something seriously did not feel right about the new situation. Instead, she insisted that she must meet Anna, who of course Kasai claimed was the one to be purchasing the property. And after realizing that their plan was now likely to fail, they resorted to plan B, which was, tragically, to murder Louise. Just 19 minutes after arriving at the property, Mohamed grabbed the hairdryer and, using the cord, overpowered and strangled Louise. Tragically, he didn't let go until she was dead. The hairdryer was later found in Kasai's residence, with DNA analysis confirming that Mohamed had used it. Following her death, the pair wrapped her body in a duvet before stuffing it in a garden bin, putting garden waste over her as a means to disguise the body. And once they were done, the pair continued business as usual, where Mohamed continued to live at the address and create several tasteless TikTok videos. And this time, he recorded himself dancing and gyrating on the driveway. He then posted videos of him singing with the hashtag #BoredAtHome. I think you and I can both agree that this was very hard to watch. Not even 24 hours after murdering an elderly woman, he was seen laughing, dancing, and smiling on camera, as if nothing had happened. I mean, it takes a very special kind of evil to be this disconnected from your actions, especially when those actions are just bloody TikTok videos. Thankfully though, this man was too much of an idiot to keep quiet, and those TikTok videos would come back to haunt him. Mohamed would also illegally sell her BMW that was sitting on the driveway, but without any attempt to change the number plate, the vehicle was very easy to track down. Using the money made from selling the BMW, he then bought himself scores of extravagant new clothes and luxury items. Despite their careless behavior afterwards, the pair must have known that the police may eventually come looking for Louise. And so, using her mobile phone, they tried to mask her disappearance with convoluted messages to her son. But there was one other problem: the body in the bin. And so, rather foolishly, both men moved the bin to Kasai's house in Barnet, where they then changed the number on the front and placed it with other normal refuse bins, expecting it to blend in until bin collectors came later that week. However, all future endeavours would not go to plan, and Mohamed was arrested the next day on July the 28th, with Kasai arrested the following day. Investigators would eventually find Louise's body tucked inside a bin. Alongside her were a pair of gloves and a bin bag, and both positively matched Kasai's DNA. The hairdryer that was used to kill Louise was eventually found in his home too, and with it containing Mohamed's DNA, both were linked to her murder. Testimonies, evidence, and DNA were all stacking up against them, and despite even filming themselves inside her home, they still denied having anything to do with her murder. Now, Coffeehouse Crime has covered many stories with rather smart criminals. However, something doesn't tell me this is the case in today's video. Moving into the legal proceedings of this case, both men would continue to express their innocence despite the overwhelming amount of evidence against them. Kasai's alleged girlfriend, Anna Reich, would take to the stand, testifying against the conman who had clearly scammed her. She stated that Kasai never paid for the 2 cars she had given him, and furthermore, that he was extremely manipulative and persuasive. Kasai would go as far as accusing Anna of being complicit in laundering money through the properties, and that she was willing to go ahead with the unlawful tax-free arrangement. Now, Anna strongly denied these claims, and it was kind of obvious that she was just another victim to Kasai. That man was clearly ruthless in his greed, and used his wit and charm to deceive women into trusting him. In the end, it was concluded that Kasai was the mastermind behind the plot to either scam or murder Louise Kam. I mean, he targeted her in the restaurant, forged a relationship, built trust for several months, and then hired Mohamed for the plot, to which he promised a split of the profit. When it came to Mohamed's trial, there would be one crucial key witness, and that came in the form of his very own ex-girlfriend, Maria. During his trial, Maria testified that she was actually at the property when Louise arrived, though she didn't meet or talk to her at all, saying that she did recall seeing her sitting in another room sternly talking to both men. Maria was advised that it was just a business deal and nothing to worry about. However, only 11 minutes after Louise arrived, Kasai asked Maria to follow him on a shopping trip. He claimed that he wanted to buy her some expensive jewellery, and so, without much hesitation, she left with him. But after the trip, she did not return to the house with Kasai. Instead, she was picked up by Mohamed. Now, Maria did not expect anything to be amiss, but while en route back to her home in Coventry, Mohamed dropped a rather strange bombshell of a statement. Turning to her in the car, he said, "I just can't believe it. I can't believe we really killed that lady." After this, he seemed to backtrack, and instead claimed it was just a silly joke. A few moments later, he jovially asked her, "Would you like me to kill you too?" During their trial, several of Mohamed's TikTok videos were submitted to the jury as evidence, with an additional means to highlight a damning judge of character. The videos shown, as well as the collection of others, revealed a very narcissistic man obsessed with wealth and material value, and showed no value or regard to the life of another human. It became evident that both men were happy to put a price tag on a person's life, and that furthermore, Kasai had the ego to really believe that his master plan could be pulled off. Despite his DNA being located on her clothing and the murder weapon, Mohamed strongly placed the blame on Kasai for the actual murder of Louise. Kasai's DNA was also found at the crime scene, so the actual perpetrator of the murder isn't clear. Kasai himself stayed quiet and refused to give any testimony during his trial, and despite the potential option of claiming he was out of the house at the time of the murder, the man remained tight-lipped and motionless in court. Now, the actual perpetrator of the murder itself was heavily contested and was subject to jury deliberation. However, on January the 16th, 2022, the jury concluded that both men were guilty of Louise Kam's murder, and by unanimous decision, both men were sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 35 years behind bars. It was only during sentencing that both men showed any hint of emotion. And of course, their crying was only for themselves. Both men cried as they heard their fate, with their fragile egos ruined as they realized they could not get away with their actions. Judge Mark Lucraft would conclude the court proceedings with his own final words. El-Aboud confessed to a friend that he had killed Louise, but denied this at trial. "We are grateful that the jury saw through his lies." The police worked quickly to establish that Louise had come to harm, and to secure the evidence to present a strong and compelling case to put before the jury. Our thoughts remain with Louise's family and friends, and we sincerely hope that these guilty verdicts will bring them some comfort. The actions of these two men can be summed up in one single word: deplorable. Kasai and Mohamed relentlessly worked towards scamming an elderly woman out of her life savings, and savagely murdered her in her own house when she realized the deception. Honestly, these actions are almost too terrible to comprehend. Mohamed found no empathy while he strangled the life out of her, and although he wasn't the one to ultimately take Louise's life, Kasai was guilty of putting her in a life-threatening position purely to line his own pockets. Louise should have never been in harm's way, and only wanted to secure a strong financial future for her sons. However, thanks to the greed and selfishness of two men, her life was cruelly and brutally snatched away. Their actions resulted from callous greed, and their lust for money outweighed their value on the life of another. Louise was preyed upon and taken advantage of by men or boys who should have known better, and their cold attitudes after the crime demonstrates their complete lack of inhumanity. Although we sadly don't know much about her life, it is evident through her sons that she was an extremely loving mother. In fact, even in her final act in this world, it was a bid to give her sons the very best she could offer. Sadly though, this want and desire to provide would result in the absolute worst of tragedies: the loss of her life, after trusting the word of a heartless conman and his moron accomplice. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the video, folks. Thinking about it, I feel very sorry for Louise and her family. She was essentially targeted for the wealth that she had after working so many years to get there. And she was targeted by two absolute idiots that didn't even really have a plan. Anyway folks, thank you so much for watching today. I really do appreciate you being here. Before you go though, I would love to know what you think about this story. To begin with, do you think that they received the punishment they deserved? And second of all, what do you think about Mohamed's videos? Anyway folks, if you'd like to support me, then please remember to subscribe. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos, then please check out my Patreon. And yeah, it seems like my camera's run out of battery, so instead of saying goodbye to you this time, I'll just show you a picture of Nero. Anyway folks, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you again very soon for another video. But until that moment arrives, remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. And you can't see me, but I promise I'm winking at the camera right now. Anyway, thank you, and goodbye.